right. Thank you so much, Anthony, for that. In the meantime, we are live in several trials. On Verdict Watch in one trial, let's delve a little bit into this Kristopher love trial that we're following out of Texas. This is the one that's getting a lot of our viewers' attention. It involves a love triangle, an accused hitman, and the death of a prominent dentist. Let's bring in Marni Jo Snyder. She's a criminal defense attorney. She joins us via Skype. This trial is a lot to digest, but what do you think in terms of the evidence against this accused hitman that's apparently accused of conspiring with a woman named Brenda Delgado, who prosecutors say was jealous that the victim, Kendra Hatcher, was dating her ex-boyfriend?
It sounds like they have a lot of cooperating witnesses in this case, co-defendants like Ms. Cortez, who spoke to police shortly after the crime, who were working to the side of the prosecution to convict Mr. Love.
So what do you make so far of the testimony? I don't know if you were able to catch much of it, but we're going to continue to bring you that feed as soon as we get it back. The testimony of the getaway driver, Ms. Cortez, Crystal Cortez.
We're going to have to see whether or not the state has offered her anything in exchange for her testimony that the defense attorneys can spin to show that she might be speaking against Mr. Love just in order to get something for herself, and that there is inaccuracies in her testimony. It's my understanding that the prosecution also intends to present some forensic testimony, some forensic evidence. So we'll have to see if the forensic evidence matches up with what any cooperating witnesses say in this case for them to have any credibility.
All right, and you were just looking at some pictures of the couple. That was a picture there of victim Kendra Hatcher and her boyfriend, and she is the victim in all of this. And of course, just to go over, I'm sorry, that was Crystal? Oh, okay. We have some testimony of Crystal Cortez, who we were just talking about, Marni Jo, who is on the stand, and she is the alleged getaway driver. She says Delgado, the jealous ex, paid her $500 to stage this robbery. Let's take a listen to some of what she had to say. Okay, folks, this is key testimony in the Kristopher Love case. That is Crystal Cortez, and we're just starting to get into some of the interesting stuff. She's the alleged getaway driver. She has pleaded guilty in this case, and she is now testifying against Kristopher Love, who is facing those capital murder charges. I want to bring in Marni Jo Snyder. What do you make so far of some of that testimony you're just listening to?
Well, she's not getting any easy breaks here. I mean, her plea agreement is that she does 35 years if she testifies truthfully in the case and that the prosecutor deems her to be truthful. So that's not an easy break. She's not going home for making up testimony against these other people. In addition, she's really the connection, because she wasn't just hired because she doesn't know a lot of people and she was down on her luck money-wise. She has a friendship with Brenda and can put her as one of the plotters, and then was the one that was in the car with Mr. Love when he was accused of having done this crime. So she really is the star witness and could put all these people together.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting to see where we go with this. Let's take, Marni Jo, you stick around with us. Let's take a quick break here on the Law and Crime Network. But when we come back, we're going to take you back to Texas for this fascinating testimony. And we're going to also update you on all of those other live trials we're following here on the Law and Crime Network. Stay with us. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Law and Crime Trial Network. You were just listening to some testimony from the getaway driver, Crystal Cortez, who says she was an integral part of planning this hit job. Again, Kendra Hatcher is the victim in all of this, and she, according to prosecutors, was killed because Brenda Delgado worked with these two other people because Brenda was jealous that Kendra was dating her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend. All right. We're live in trial. That's why we had to interrupt that soundbite, because we want to take you live there. But first, I want to bring in Marni Jo Snyder. What do you make of some of this testimony?
Well, it turns out that she's not just a getaway driver. She absolutely contributed planning to everything that went on, from the fact that Mr. Love should be wearing gloves to obtaining a weapon. And what we also find out is that she didn't just witness some things. Brenda Delgado really trusted her. They actually went out to dinner after the murder and things like that. So she had a lot of knowledge of the planning, of Brenda's motives, and then how they came to get in touch with Mr. Love to do all of these things. And what we hear, and what I assume we will see later, is that there were even text messages between not just Brenda Delgado and Mr. Love, but actually between this witness, Crystal, and Mr. Love at the same time. So there might be even more evidence to come out that they can trace through cell phone evidence.
Wow. Okay, let's continue, if we can, listening to some of this crucial testimony of Crystal Cortez as she describes the planning and then the eventual killing of victim Kendra Hatcher. Let's take a listen to her testimony from earlier today. Wow. Okay, the defense attorney really just ripping apart this key witness for the prosecution. She, you were just hearing from Crystal Cortez, she's the accused getaway driver, but she's really more than that. She was intimately involved in this plan to kill Kendra Hatcher. And she says that basically she worked with this woman, Brenda Delgado, who she thought had cartel ties, and recruited Kristopher Love, who's the defendant, to take out Kendra Hatcher because Kendra Hatcher was dating Brenda's ex-boyfriend, and Brenda was jealous. A lot to digest right now in this case. I want to bring in Marni Jo Snyder. She's been watching this testimony unfold with me. What do you make? I think the defense attorney really did a good job of ripping this witness apart.
Well, he did. We hear that there are a lot of inconsistencies already in what she said to police. Crystal said to police. She gave multiple statements when she realized at different levels, as she realized she was in more and more trouble and what they could prove. And instead of just boring the jury and pointing those out, which I think is important and needs to be done eventually, but I don't know how much time he might be bringing those in with other people. Yeah. But what he did do is point out the things that make absolutely no sense. You have a long conversation that has to be in Spanish in order to keep it a secret, but out of that conversation, you have no idea how much you're going to be paid or how much someone else is going to be paid. You volunteered to do certain things for this murder because you'd rather take a bigger pot of gold at the end, but you don't actually know how much that pot is going to be. So he really did a great job pointing out the things that just make no sense and won't make sense to anyone. It doesn't have to do with inconsistencies. It has to do with logic. And the jury's going to be compelled by those things.
Absolutely. And apparently, from what I heard, it sounded like she didn't even know. She claims that they planned this whole murder and didn't even know how they were going to escape from it or a plan afterwards. It's kind of nuts if you think about it, if they really went through this thorough planning. So is she a credible witness or not? Let's continue to closely monitor this trial. We have to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll take you back inside that trial out of Texas. Stay with us. Very, I would say, poetic closing in the Tammy Moore case, and right now we're in deliberations on verdict watch. Will the jurors convict Tammy Moore of conspiring with her husband to kidnap a young girl, 20-year-old Heather Elvis, who disappeared? Marni Jo Snyder, she's been on the phone with me via Skype. What do you make of some of these closings here?
Well, I think it's very smart of the prosecution to try to simplify, or she actually said dumb down the evidence, but it was a really long trial. I remember speaking about this trial last week, and there were a lot of experts. This had cell phone ping testimony, experts explaining how locations were verified by cell phone tower data. And then it also had a lot to do with a payphone that was in the location where Miss Elvis went missing. And so it was a really dense trial. And I understand the idea of boiling it down to that woman scorn trope. But they don't have a body. And while they have motive, that certainly doesn't show that they're the ones that did anything to Heather Elvis, because there is a huge lull of time between the last time that couple spoke to Ms. Elvis and the disappearance. So there are a lot of holes.
Absolutely, Marni. Sorry to cut you off there. We have to go to a quick break, but when we return, we'll be taking you back to these courtrooms live. Stay with us here on the Law and Crime Network. Alrighty, so it's kind of hard to see what's going on there, but you can see the victim, John Hernandez, on the ground there. He was taken to the hospital after that and died a few days later. Now, this sheriff's deputy is facing very serious charges. I want to bring in my guest who's been with me this afternoon, Marni Jo Snyder, criminal defense attorney. As you look at that video, your initial impressions of what's going on here?
It really looks that he is in a chokehold, and Mr. Thompson is not letting go. You can see that Mr. Thompson's wife is holding down his left arm, and he is just down on the ground. You can see some blood coming out of his face and onto Mr. Thompson's arm as Mr. Thompson says, "Do you want me to hit you again?" And there seems to be some yelling about Mr. Hernandez resisting, but you can see at the slow pace that he's moving his legs. He's being strangled, in my opinion, on the ground right there. And I know that was what the ME found as the cause of death.
So what do you make of the defense attorney's claim here that after the first punch, he was trying to defend himself from this guy?
Right, and he very well might have been. It appears that Mr. Hernandez was the aggressor. His wife kind of corroborates that Mr. Hernandez threw the first punch. But what we hear is that Terry Thompson threw a second one that connected somewhere, because I can see a lot of blood, and then is being pinned to the ground by two people. So I think it's the length of the defense that the defense attorney is going to have to speak to, is how long does this gentleman have to be incapacitated, and in this case, while cutting off his airway, in order for Mr. Thompson to be safe.
And I did misspeak a little bit. This is actually outside of a Denny's in Northeast Harris County in Texas. I initially said a bar, and that is because it's undisputed that John Hernandez, the victim in all of this, apparently was drunk. His wife said he was drunk. And he went outside to take a leak, apparently. And this is when the confrontation between the sheriff's deputy, Terry Thompson, and this man began.
This is going to be really important when they talk to witnesses that were at the Denny's, because we have to find out whether his intoxication caused him to be more violent, or whether his intoxication made him kind of a stumbling goofball that could have been contained with less effort, less force around his neck. And I can't tell from the video.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult to tell, and we're also seeing it looks like the end part of the fight. We're not seeing, of course, how it started. So we're going to continue to monitor that trial out of Texas, and if we get a live feed back inside the courtroom, we had opening statements this morning, we'll take you there live in just a minute. But in the meantime, I want to turn now to this other case that we're covering, and this is a huge case out of South Carolina. This is a woman, Tammy Moore, who is facing kidnapping charges. And bear with me here because it's a little convoluted, but she's accused with conspiring with her husband to kidnap a young woman by the name of Heather Elvis, who her husband was having an affair with. Just before break, we were listening to some closing arguments from the prosecution in this case. Let's now turn to the defense because, of course, Tammy Moore is saying, you know what? It wasn't me. I was not involved in Heather Elvis's disappearance. Let's listen. And we have some breaking news here on the Law and Crime Network. It is reported that the jurors have reached a verdict in the Tammy Moore case. That's the case you were just listening to some closing arguments from the defense. They were deliberating for about a day and a half now, and we have just gotten word from our producer that the jurors have reached a verdict. You can see the courtroom live right there. And any minute now, you would expect that verdict will be read. I want to bring in my guest as we watch folks gather in the courtroom, Marni Snyder. Marni, wow, we have a verdict in this case. I don't think, considering, this was a largely circumstantial case and it was a long case, that the jurors were really deliberating for that long in this case.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they were out that long. I think you said around a day and a half. That doesn't seem like a lot for a 2-week case. Often jurors will deliberate for a long time. We don't know what they're doing back there. But when there's a case with this much dense evidence, I would have expected that they would maybe ask to see some things to at least go over some more of it. But it seems like maybe they all had particular gut feelings, and they just needed to discuss a little bit further where those feelings took them.
All right, folks, you're looking at a live feed right now. That's what's happening in South Carolina. There she is, the defendant, Tammy Moore. She has her glasses on. I can only imagine how anxious she is, awaiting to see what the jurors are going to say in this case. Again, this has been a largely circumstantial case. I think that there is no doubt that the prosecutors proved that she was jealous and upset when she found out her husband was having an affair with a woman that he met at the Tilted Kilt. But the question is, and we just lost our feed. As soon as we get it back, we'll show it to you. Sometimes that happens when the jurors come in. The question here, though, is there enough to link it all together, right? We got a lot of motive, but do we have all the pieces of the pie to make this a guilty verdict? Marni, what do you think?
Yeah, there was a lot of argument that really, without the body, without DNA, without some more direct evidence to connect Tammy Moore to this crime, you're really just going on motive. And they're arguing that in a small town like this, with that much drama, it doesn't have to just be motive. It can be drama that would make Ms. Elvis leave town. It could be drama that included other people that point to someone different having done this crime. So the defense is hoping that they've raised enough reasonable doubt by poking holes in that motive doesn't necessarily equal doing it.
And I don't know if you folks just saw that. That's Tammy Moore there. She looks like she's getting a little teared up. And I just saw her go whisper something in the ear of a blonde-headed woman. I think that might be her daughter. It is confirmed it is her daughter. I'm not sure what she said, but right after that, she did get emotional. And now it looks like she's going to talk to some of her family members again. I can only imagine, when you think about these cases, so tragic for the family of Heather Elvis, but you also have the families of the defendants who, in this case, are really also innocent victims in all of this because their life has been upended by what's happened.
Yeah, I can't imagine how nervous they must feel as well. And, whatever Tammy Moore knows about what really happened or what didn't happen, those people that support her are really in the dark on some things. And they're probably really nervous about what's coming right now and don't know when they'll be able to see her again.
And folks, if you're just joining us here on the Law and Crime Trial Network, you've joined us for a very exciting time because in just minutes, we are expecting the verdict in this Tammy Moore case. This is the case out of South Carolina where this woman, Tammy Moore, is facing conspiracy and kidnapping charges for allegedly conspiring with her husband to kidnap a young girl named Heather Elvis. And I actually believe if we can show some of the pictures of Heather Elvis, we have those. We've been showing them throughout this trial, and her body has never been found. It's presumed that she is dead, but again, her body's never been found. This is purely a kidnapping case. At this moment, Tammy Moore is not facing those murder charges, but it does look like, potentially if her body was found, that we could see her face further charges in all of this. Okay, you're looking at a live shot inside the courtroom as all the folks there are gathering. We see Tammy Moore. We've seen some of her family members. This is a very, very anxious time because, of course, in just minutes, Tammy Moore is going to learn her fate. Will the jurors find her guilty in this case? Some of the evidence the prosecutors have against her, I know it's not a lot, but they do have some evidence.
Right. Well, some of the more fascinating evidence is that they have the couple, Tammy Moore and her husband, Sydney, buying a pregnancy test at 1:30 in the morning. And they find an empty box, no stick, no test, at Heather Elvis's home. And so the allegation is that, Tammy Moore was so enraged that she wanted to see the truth for herself. And that they work on this scheme to set Heather Elvis up to come to a payphone. So there was also evidence of calls coming in and out of that payphone that they believed that the prosecution said they could connect to Tammy Moore or to Sydney. And then they have a very strange image. They can't tell who is using the payphone before Heather Elvis, but they do have an image of a car that matches the Moores coming out of that parking lot. And so there's a lot of circumstantial evidence here that points to them as having gotten Heather Elvis to that payphone, to that area at about 3 a.m. or so. And Heather Elvis is calling Sydney's phone over and over after that. So, it's a very strange case. This evidence from the prosecution worked out before for Sydney because the jury in his kidnapping case was a hung jury. He is serving time now for obstruction of justice. But the prosecution's case usually gets better on a retrial. And while this isn't a retrial, it is very, very similar, if not exactly the same, circumstantial evidence against Tammy Moore. So
and in a way, Marni, I think you would agree with me here that there is actually more evidence against, if you just look at really the nature of the evidence, that there's more evidence against Sydney, her husband, because Sydney was the one seen on tape at the Walmart buying that pregnancy tape. And we were just showing some of the surveillance footage from the gas station where he's then seen, and there's the Walmart, him buying the pregnancy test. And then we also showed some of that footage of him making a phone call. We find out that that phone call is indeed, and this is the night of the Heather Elvis's disappearance, by the way, that Sydney Moore, Tammy's husband, makes a phone call to Heather Elvis. Her cell phone pings from this Peachtree Landing area 2 times. Her car is found there, but she is never discovered. We don't know where she is, if she's still alive, if she's dead, but prosecutors believe whatever happened to her, this woman you see on your screen right now, Tammy Moore, is responsible. And this goes beyond just a jealous situation. Part of the motive the prosecution painted was that Tammy Moore feared that this young woman, Heather Elvis, was pregnant with her husband's child. And that played into why the two of them hatched this scheme to get rid of her. Marni, Joe, it's going to certainly be interesting to see when this verdict comes in.
Yeah, I mean, they are working without a body here. So they're working without the verification of pregnancy. But they certainly have some circumstantial evidence, the buying of the pregnancy test, to point to the fact that that is really what broke down the relationship between Sydney and Heather, and then what got Tammy so enraged that whatever she may have known about the affair before, that rage came to a head and caused Heather's disappearance.
Okay, so one of the things that I always find interesting as we kind of predict what's going to happen here is to talk about the jury questions. They wanted to re-watch all of the surveillance video, that Walmart, the black truck, and the other videos, which experts believe belonged or could have belonged to Tammy and Sydney. What does that tell you, that they were a bit fixated on some of that surveillance footage?
Well, I think juries are really looking for direct evidence, physical evidence, things that they can feel and touch and see with their own eyes. So I think some of that is a juror's instinct to really want to review those things carefully. I think they hold them in more importance sometimes than testimony, and then they let the testimony put that all together. But I also think they want to get it right. I think that jurors usually know by the end, certainly by the end of a long trial like this, that they're carrying out a very solemn duty, whether there's a murder charge or a kidnapping charge. And they want to make sure that they've reviewed everything really carefully so they can see it for their own eyes. Here we go.
Okay, here we go, folks. The jurors were brought in. The judge is sitting down. This is the moment that we are all waiting for as trial watchers. Let's listen in. All right, folks, you just heard the judge addressing the folks in the gallery, saying no emotional outbursts, keep it professional. He is bringing the jurors in right as we speak. Marni Joe Snyder's on the line with me. You know, this is a crucial moment right now, and obviously tensions are very high in the courtroom.
Right. This is, I don't breathe through this entire part when I have a case going. But I do prepare the supporters of my clients all the time, because it's very important for the family to understand that if there is a guilty verdict, this is the judge that is going to be sentencing your loved one, and you don't want your outbursts to reflect on them at all. So good news or bad news, we need to have decorum in the courtroom. It's so important. And then I start holding my breath and getting ready to hear the verdict. And it's a really tense time.
All right, let's see if we can listen in now to what's going on in court. Welcome back, everybody, to the Law and Crime Network. I'm your host this afternoon, Rachel Stockman, and as you saw there, we have some breaking news in the Tammy Moore case. You just heard it read moments ago. She was found guilty of kidnapping and conspiracy to kidnap. I want to bring in my guest, Marni Joe Snyder, who's been with me for a very exciting afternoon here on the Law and Crime Network. And Marni, I gotta say, things don't shock me easily, but I thought that they were going to acquit her, or at least be hung on this.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have a body. That's the thing that really kind of throws you off, is that there's speculation as to what happened, not just who did it. And so it is very hard to prove a case like this. I think what was concerning is the defense didn't present an entire alternate story. Now, they can point back and say, well, we don't have an alternate story because no one knows what's happened, because there is no body here. But I think the jurors were looking for something different that Tammy did, a way for her to show something about how she was not involved in this, when there was really critical cell phone tower evidence, the car in the parking lot that matched hers, and a disappearance when a woman might be pregnant with her husband's child.
Wow.
And I think they could ignore those things.
Well, and I think, too, that her taking the stand in her own defense did not help the case at all. We're going to play some of that testimony in case you missed it, because I think that she may have ended up hurting her case, because here you go, going into the defense's case, you have a prosecution's case that's very circumstantial. We've gone over some of the evidence, not a whole lot. And then you have Tammy Moore taking the stand and not really helping. What did you think of when she testified?
I mean, I think it was a really big risk, because you're talking about someone who the prosecution is characterizing as an angry, angry woman, so angry that she was willing to kidnap Heather Elvis and maybe lead to her demise. And then she needs to be calm on the stand enough to show that she's not that woman. On the other hand, who wouldn't be upset if their husband cheated on them and impregnated someone else in their very small town? So it's a really fine line to walk, and it's a really treacherous line to walk in front of a jury.
Absolutely, and I'm just told that moments ago, defense has asked for a new trial, and the judge has already denied that. That's pretty typical in a case like this, especially when you have an outcome against your client, for the defense attorneys to try to move for a new trial. Okay, we have a lot going on here on the Law and Crime Trial Network. We're inside courtrooms, and we're following all sorts of high-profile criminal cases going on across the country. You just heard it live here on the network. Guilty in the Tammy Moore case. She was convicted of kidnapping and conspiracy to kidnap. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back in just a few minutes. Stay with us. All right. right, folks, we have some breaking news in the trial that we are following out of South Carolina. Tammy Moore convicted on conspiracy and kidnapping charged. She was accused by the prosecutors of working with her husband to kidnap a young woman, Heather Elvis. And this woman was having an affair with her husband. Heather Elvis has never been seen since she disappeared, feared dead, but her body has never been found. Right now, I am told in just minutes, we're going to have the sentencing phase. That's pictures there you can see of Heather Elvis, the 20-year-old that was having an affair with Tammy Moore's husband. We're going to have the sentencing phase of this trial. It looks like the jurors are standing up. Marni Joe Snyder is on standby. We're going to watch this because it looks like court is beginning. This is the sentencing phase of Tammy Moore's case. All right, breaking news, folks. You heard the judge read it. He sentenced Tammy Moore to 30 years. She had credit for approximately 1 year she already spent in jail. I want to bring in my guest for the afternoon, Mary Jo Snyder. Your reaction to the sentence? Wow, that was quick, too.
Yeah, I can't believe that that sentence was first handed down today. I can't believe that it was handed down after a 5-minute speech by defense attorneys. Without apparently preparing Tammy Moore at all for the fact that she might have to talk to the judge today, who is going to sentence her after a guilty verdict.
And can we also talk about the fact that
I've never seen anything quite like that.
Yeah, this whole thing's been a bit shocking, but can we also talk about the fact that Tammy Moore, if you saw before break, she actually addressed the judge and she threw her attorneys essentially under the bus, in my opinion.
She absolutely did, while standing right next to them. She said she alleged that they did a terrible job, but she also alleged that her defense was somewhere in the discovery, that she wasn't allowed to go through the discovery, and that they didn't present things she wanted presented. And that's really interesting because she actually did hit on some things that under the law could get an attorney in trouble if they don't, present certain things that the defendant insists on. But, I mean, she really just threw them right under the bus. She said she had to do her own trial, and they had no idea what they were doing.
All right, folks, and you just saw Tammy Moore leaving the courtroom, which for what probably will be her last time in a while. She was in handcuffs. She was sentenced just moments ago to 30 years behind bars for her role in the conspiracy and kidnapping of that young woman, 20-year-old Heather Elvis. As the sentence was read, you could see her just after it hugging some of her family members. It has been a bit emotional. And as we were just discussing with Marni Joe Snyder, she actually, during her brief comments to the judge, which firstly, it is quite rare for defendants to even address the judge during the sentencing phase at all. She threw her attorneys under the bus, basically saying she had to do a lot of the work during this case. And there she was doing this as she stood right next to her attorneys. There she is. This is recorded video from moments ago of her hugging her daughter. I believe that's her daughter there, as she finds out her fate 30 years behind bars. Let's talk about this, though. Is she really going to serve all that time, and does she have an appealable case? What do you think, Marni?
You know what? I can't say that I know how South Carolina does their time credit. They might have an early release, but it's usually for nonviolent crimes when the person has had good behavior. This really comes down to her behavior in jail, her rehabilitation, and possibly going in front of the parole board and taking responsibility for her actions, which she certainly didn't do today, actually in any shape or form.
Well, yeah, and again, if defendants do talk to the jurors during sentencing, it's often to say, I'm so sorry, or to show some kind of remorse for what happened, and judges will often, take that into consideration when they're doling out the sentence. But again, she was sentenced for 30 years for each count, kidnapping and that conspiracy count. They'll run concurrently at the same time, and she gets credit for her 1 year that she has already spent behind bars. That seems like a pretty tough sentence here.
Right. Well, I think that the judge is allowed to take in consideration, and I think that he did, that no body has been recovered that it's very likely that Heather Elvis met her demise, and that it is very likely that it could have been at the hands of the couple that kidnapped her, or at least they put her in such danger that she lost her life. And I am sure that the judge considered that. The other thing is the judge didn't have much to consider about Tammy Moore. The argument that was made by the defense attorneys was that she's a lifelong resident of the area, that her father's deceased, and that she goes to church and she graduated on time and has no criminal history. That's the kind of facts that I get from my client before we go to a quick bail hearing, when I've barely gotten the chance to know them, so that I have something to explain to the judge as to why they're connected to the community and they won't be a flight risk.
All in a matter.
That, yeah.
It's crazy. All in a matter of an hour, really, maybe less than an hour. It's been going so fast, I've lost track of time. Yeah. But you have her getting convicted. I don't even know if they even took much of a break. Then you have a sentencing, and then she's put in the slammer for 30 years. Unbelievable. In case you missed it here on the Law and Crime Network, we want you to listen as the verdict is being read. Take a listen. This is from just moments ago. We do have it. I'm sorry about that. We do have the verdict. If you missed it just about 45 minutes ago, take a listen. All right, there you heard it. Guilty on that conspiracy and kidnapping charge. This just happened moments ago in this case that we've been following out of South Carolina. Tammy Moore convicted for conspiring with her husband to kidnap a young woman who disappeared in 2013 and whose body has never been found. This young woman, Heather Elvis, had an affair with Tammy Moore's husband, Sidney Moore. And we just heard her getting convicted there as the verdict was read. Marni Jo, she's been with me all afternoon. She's a criminal defense attorney. I think you and I are pretty shocked in terms of the speed in which all of this has happened. Her sentencing hearing happened in a flash.
Yes, it did. It really did. I'm surprised that there were no mental health or psychological reports that were requested by the defense prior to sentencing, if they hadn't been done before. And she also suffered a miscarriage while she was in custody. And that's a trauma, is what we call that, right? In the defense community and in the psychological community. And that level of trauma wasn't addressed at all. I probably would have put on an expert to talk about the trauma of losing a baby in jail, especially when the allegations involve a pregnancy and a pregnant woman having gone missing. That's a huge psychological factor that would have been considered by the judge. And no one presented that other than saying that she lost a baby.
Yeah, and in case you missed it, Tammy did have a chance to speak briefly to the judge before the sentencing. First, we're going to hear, though, from the defense attorney who is pleading for leniency. Take a listen. You're just listening to some tearful victim impact statements as the judge considers his punishment in the case against Tammy Moore. And again, if you're just joining us, she was convicted just about an hour ago of those conspiracy and kidnapping charges. She's accused, according to prosecutors, of conspiring with her husband to kidnap a young woman her husband was having an affair with. Heather Elvis, that young woman, 20 years old, never found. Her body never found. I'm joined by Marni Jo Snyder. Do you think in this case, Marni Jo, that we could potentially see further charges if Heather's body is found?
If her body's found and they can make that connection from either circumstantially that the night that she disappeared is about the night that she met her end, or that they can connect it somehow back to the kidnapping, absolutely. There is now a conviction, and so this part is kind of entered in factually into whatever happens next. And there can be some serious problems there in the future if they can connect her to this murder.
And again, it's been 5 years now and still no body in this case, but prosecutors suspect that whatever happened to Heather Elvis, it was done, or at least Tammy Moore had some role in her demise. Very tragic story. Let's listen now and see what the judge's sentence was. We just heard this about a half an hour ago.
Or you have been found guilty by jury trial on the charges of kidnapping and conspiracy to kidnap. The sentence of the court for each charge is that you be confined to the State Department of Corrections for 30 years. The sentences will run concurrently. You'll be given credit for any time served thus far. All right? Anything further from the state on this matter?
No, Your Honor.
Anything further from the defense on this?
No, Judge.
All right. Let me see the attorneys on one side.
All right, sentenced to 30 years for each count. And she's going to be serving this time consecutively. That means together at the same time. Mary Jo Snyder, we've been reacting to this verdict and sentencing now for the last hour. But I have to say, as I replay what we've witnessed over the last few minutes, it is quite shocking just how fast this all unraveled.
Really fast. I think you're right. I think that from verdict to end of sentencing and giving her appeal rights was about an hour. The presentation by the attorneys maybe 5 minutes, and then her rant against her attorneys probably 2 or 3 minutes. It was incredibly, incredibly fast.
It certainly was. And now in terms of what her future holds, she was taken into custody. Marni, what do we expect to happen now?
Well, she has some decisions to make, and it varies a little bit state by state. So excuse me if I'm not on point on South Carolina today. But she will kind of have to decide which avenue of appeal to take, whether she wants to continue that rant against her lawyers and argue some sort of ineffectiveness claim against them, or whether she wants to appeal the verdict and errors that may have occurred at trial that aren't necessarily on her attorneys or their ineffectiveness. And with a sentence this long, she'll probably go through the entire process. So direct appeal and appealing any errors that were made during the trial, and then complaining about her attorneys later on.
Marni Jo Snyder, thanks so much for being with me during this verdict over the last hour or so. I know you have to run shortly, but I want to turn now to another case that we're following. As I said, here on the Law and Crime Network, we're always bringing you live inside the most fascinating trials. I want to take you now to Texas, where it looks like we have a live shot in the courtroom there. This is the Kristopher Love case, another very complicated, very interesting case. Kristopher Love is the accused hitman. He is accused of working with a woman by the name of Brenda Delgado and another woman to kill Kendra Hatcher. And the motive for this, according to prosecutors, the ringleader conspiracy behind all of this, Brenda Delgado, was jealous that Kendra was dating her boyfriend and wanted Kendra dead. Who did she hire? According to prosecutors, that man who you see live in the courtroom right now, he's a man by the name of Kristopher Love. And according to police and investigators, he is the one who pulled the trigger and shot Kendra Hatcher in that parking lot back in 2015. This was really a case of a love triangle that led to a 2015 slaying of this prominent dentist. Kendra Hatcher was pretty well known in the community there as a dentist. And I believe we're going to have court start any minute. Marni, are you still with me, or did you have to run?
No, I'm here.
Great. So before we broke for lunch, and there's been so much happening here, I have to refresh my memory and take me back to Texas. We had someone on the stand who was supposedly the getaway driver in all of this. More than that, really, she was with Brenda Delgado, who is also facing capital murder charges, when she really hatched this plan to kill this prominent dentist. What did you make of some of her testimony?
Yeah, we found out she was not just a getaway driver. She did, in fact, hatch the plan. She helped to recruit who they were going to use as the gunman. We heard some interesting things during the defense's cross-examination, and one of those things was that everyone else that the pair of women had recruited to be the gunman was told that it was going to be a gunpoint robbery, so that they could get her license away from her so she couldn't go on an international vacation with her boyfriend the next day.
Because this was on the eve, Marni, and correct me if I'm wrong, the day she was killed, Kendra Hatcher, was on the eve of when she was planning to go to Mexico with her boyfriend.
That's correct. And the defense actually brought that up a little bit too, because he did say to the witness, Crystal, on the stand, well, if Brenda said to everyone she's so connected with a cartel in Mexico, why are you guys running around buying guns on Facebook and trying to figure out who to have do this? Why was that not accomplished by the cartel or in Mexico? So it's another thing that the defense is pointing out that just doesn't make sense within her own story.
All right, folks, as we're in standby right now for that trial to begin in any moment, if you're just joining us, they were in a lunch break for the past hour, but it's been a busy hour because we also had a verdict come in the other major case that we've been following out of South Carolina. But we're back in Kristopher Love, and as Marni, Joe, and I were just explaining, this is a love triangle that ended in the slaying of that prominent dentist from the Texas area, Kendra Hatcher. And I believe we may have some pictures of Kendra Hatcher. She was the one that was found dead, and by prosecutors' estimation, it was at the hands of Kristopher Love, who was the hired hitman in all of this. There she is, pictures of her and her boyfriend. And it was really a love triangle because this Brenda Delgado, she got jealous that her ex-boyfriend was now with Kendra and wanted her dead, according to prosecutors. Well, the victim's mom took the stand, and it was very emotional. Let's take a listen to some of what she told jurors. It was a rather short witness. That woman was apparently a friend or acquaintance of some of the accomplices, and she apparently overheard some conversation about this alleged plot. Marni, Joe, what did you take from her testimony?
Well, one thing is, now I know what the prosecutor meant when he said that even without Crystal Cortez, he could prove his case. So what this is really doing is bolstering Crystal Cortez's statement, because it's saying we really could prove it without her. It would just be through these shorter, boring witnesses where we'd have to connect the dots, right? Is kind of what it boils down to. And so he's bringing everyone that can corroborate those conversations. So she was able to overhear, or at least know, a 1 or 2 word topic of the conversation that that the three were having when they were kind of starting to plot this out. And she said, I don't know everything that they said. I just know that they were all involved in talking about this one topic. And look, those are the 3 that are now charged with this. So it's still compelling. But really what it does is bolster Crystal's testimony. Because
she kind of got a little torn apart at the end there, so I can only imagine the prosecutor is trying to build back up her credibility, that she is in fact telling the truth about what happened, what led to victim Kendra Hatcher's death. Okay, this is a fascinating case. We're live in this courtroom, and we'll take you back there in just a few minutes. But first, a quick break. I promise we'll be back in just minutes.